Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere you probably shouldn't. You didn't plan to end up here. No one ever does. One wrong turn, a missing milestone, and now you're standing in ankle-deep mud outside a crooked tavern, with a name too smudged to read, and a sign that swings even when there's no wind. You squint. Was that a finger pressed against the glass, or just your imagination? Probably your imagination. Probably. You're cold-soaked and a little bit lost. But there it is, a crooked wooden sign swinging from a rusted chain, above a warped doorway, a faded painted tankard, and a single word you don't recognise. Written in a language that feels both ancient and recent, like it was carved by someone who'd been dead for centuries, but just recently remembered they had unfinished business. You don't knock. No one knocks. You simply push the door and it groans, not creaks, not whines, groans, like it's tired of seeing people like you walk in. The heat hits you first, thick, fermented, and laced with something too herbal to be clean. Then comes the noise, a low murmur, like bees arguing in the dark. And then like a punchline, whispered through ale-soaked breath, a laugh-sharp female and far too familiar. She sees you before you even find a seat. You know this because her eyes don't move, but you feel them settle on you like steam on skin. She's standing behind the bar, or what passes for a bar here, bare elbows on the wood. One eyebrow cocked as if she's been waiting specifically for you. Not a type like you, but you personally, as though she's read the end of your story and finds the beginning amusing. She doesn't speak at first. She just slides a mug across the surface. You catch it with the reflexes of a person who has either fought in battle or dodged enough domestic crockery to know danger when it's airborne. You raise it to your lips, and before it even touches your mouth, she finally says something. Careful, she purrs. That batch remembers things. The ale is warm, sweet, and stings just slightly. Not from alcohol, no, this is the sting of recognition. Something in it feels familiar, like a song you didn't know you knew. The mug is old, carved with notches that might be tally marks, or names, or warnings. You try to ask her something, maybe where you are, or what's in the drink, or why her eyes look exactly like someone you dreamt about once after catching a fever in the woods. But she's already gone. Not gone. She's just somewhere else, everywhere else, weaving between tables, where shadows laugh and nothing stays where it should. You find a seat, it's damp. Of course it is, everything here is slightly damp. Even the fire which burns with the flicker of someone who isn't fully committed to the job. The man beside you is asleep with his face in a bowl of something that smells like regret and boiled onion. A dog under the table lifts one eye and growls not at you, but at something behind you that you're too smart to turn around for. You sip the drink again and it hits harder. This time, the warmth isn't comfort, it's invitation. And it takes you a moment to realise something is carved into the bottom of your mug. You tilt it toward the firelight. A phrase scrawled in a hand so jagged it could have been carved by fingernails. You were never meant to find this place. You laugh because it is absurd, right? You were just passing through. You saw a light. You were cold, wet, and maybe a little hungry for something stronger than broth. But even as you laugh, you know it isn't true. You were always going to end up here. The girl returns. She's holding a second mug now, and this one's steaming. Not ale, something darker. You open your mouth to ask what it is, but she says it first. Memory, she says, smiling that lopsided smile that says she knows too much. This one's on the house. You don't want to drink it, which means you will. And when you do, because of course you do, you see it. Not a vision. Not quite. More like a shifting of layers, like someone peeled back a bit of the air, and underneath it was a tavern not quite like this one, but older, deeper, and more alive. Girls pouring drinks, not just with smiles, but with intention. Their eyes never blinking, their hands never slipping their voices, weaving stories into each pint, not for fun, for something else. People think we're just girls selling beer, the one from the vision says, looking straight at you, even though she's made of smoke, but we're the ones who remember. You blink and it's gone, Just the girl in front of you again, the warmth of the mug in your hands, the fire flickering. I should leave you, say, not meaning it. She just nods. Sure you should. But your seat gets more comfortable. The sounds around you soften. The dog has stopped growling. And outside, the rain doesn't stop, but the rest of the village does. No footsteps, no carts, no voices. Just you, her, and this strange tavern that doesn't want to be found, but also doesn't like letting people go. Because now that you've tasted what they serve here, you'll start seeing things you shouldn't. And hearing stories no one's supposed to tell, like the one she leans in to whisper. Now her breath warm, her voice steady. They say none of us were born here, that we just showed up one by one. And when the 12th one came, everything changed. You open your mouth to ask what changed. She raises her finger to her lips. Shh, she says, eyes gleaming. We start with her tomorrow. Tonight we begin with the first. And the mug that made her remember. You glance down. Yours is empty. And the dog is watching again. She doesn't tell you her name, not the real one. Instead, she gives you a look, one of those glances that carries too much weight for such a slight twitch of the face, and says, "Call me Mist." Not because of her nature, but because that's what she leaves behind. You don't ask what that means. You've already learned that in this tavern, questions are like spilled drinks, messy, dangerous, and liable to get you stabbed if you ask who poured them. So you just nod like a good patron and let her pour the next drink. This one smells less like ale and more like old libraries and unsaid apologies. She begins not like a storyteller, but like someone remembering a thing they've tried hard to forget. The first girl didn't mean to sell beer, she says, wiping the lip of a mug with a cloth that's seen more blood than broth. She was just trying to hide. You blink and the fire shifts. It leans a little sideways, as if drawn toward the gravity of what's coming next. She arrived during the famine. Mist continues when the sky forgot how to rain, and the priests blamed the moon. People were starving. Stealing bread was a death sentence. Selling ale was only marginally safer. But it was what she had: barley, wild yeast, and an instinct for brewing that didn't come from her father or books, but from somewhere deeper. The tavern around you seems to grow stiller. Even the drunk 2 tables down stops humming his tuneless ballad. Something in the room has begun to listen. She didn't have a name either, Mist says, but the villagers called her Bramble because she pricked anyone who got too close. Not with words, she wasn't one for talking, but with glances, silence, and once a very sharp chicken bone. You almost laugh, but Mist gives you a look. Not angry, just warning. Bramble's beer wasn't like this swill, she adds, gesturing at the frothy mugs littering the bar. It had properties. Historians still argue whether it was the grain, the method, or something darker, but everyone agrees on 2 things. It made people talk, and it made them remember. Not things they wanted to remember, mind you, things they had buried. It began simply enough. A man drank a pint, smiled, and began confessing to a series of petty thefts involving turnips, buttons, and one unfortunate pig, harmless, amusing even, until another man drank, and he confessed too about a bricked-up door and the girl he'd sealed behind it. By the 3rd pint, the tavern was a confessional. By the 5th, it was a courtroom. And by the 7th, someone tried to burn it down. They failed, Mist says with a smirk. Of course they did. Fire doesn't catch when the building doesn't want to burn. And Bramble. She just kept pouring. She said if they wanted to purge the truth, they'd have to drown it first. It worked in a way. People stopped confessing, not because they'd run out of sins, but because they'd stopped drinking. The tavern went quiet, the mugs went dry, and Bramble disappeared. Or so they thought. Mist leans closer, now eyes glinting like glass under candlelight. But someone kept seeing her, not walking the streets, not buying barley, just behind the bar. Only for a second, like a smudge in the mirror, and always when someone was lying. She taps her nail on the wooden counter. Once, twice. You glance down and notice there are tiny carvings along the grain, name symbols, and what looks disturbingly like a tally. Truth is, she says, no one ever found out where she came from, or where she went. Some say she was a ghost. Others think she was cursed, doomed to wander from tavern to tavern, until the world learned to stop lying. You take another sip of your drink. It tastes different now, darker, slightly metallic, with an aftertaste of something you're afraid to name. Anyway, Mist says, leaning back, that was the first bramble. She didn't just sell beer. She turned the tavern into a mirror. Not a flattering one. The kind that shows you the part of your face you've been pretending wasn't there. You glance around the room again. The fire is normal. The drunk is humming again. The dog is snoring loudly. But you swear the mug in your hand just got heavier. She wasn't alone though. Mist continues casually flipping a mug over and drawing something in the condensation left behind. It's a circle. Inside it 3 dots. A triangle. A line. There were more. They came one by one, always after something went wrong. War, famine, flood, betrayal. You ask carefully how many of them there were. Mist grins. 12, she says. Always 12, never more, never less. Until you showed up. The room feels colder. Not freezing. Just off like the moment before a candle flickers out. You're joking, you say, not quite managing to laugh. Am I? She replies, tilting her head. Why do you think your name isn't written in the guest book? Why do you think the rain led you here and nowhere else? You look at your hands. They're steady. That worries you more than if they were shaking. We'll get to the others, Mist says, wiping the bar clean again. But next is the girl with the inventory list. The one who knew everything anyone ever drank and why they shouldn't have. You blink. She's already gone. Only the mug remains. The girl with the inventory list had a name, but no one ever used it. They called her Ledger, not out of affection, but because she remembered. Not remembered like the village elder with his fussy tales about crop yields and goat thefts. No. Ledger remembered everything, and she remembered it in ink. You first hear about her when you notice the stack of cracked parchment thin sheets nailed haphazardly to the inside of the tavern's back door. At first, it looks like nothing more than a chaotic menu. Ale, mead, cider. Possibly wine and something crossed out so many times it's now just a black smear with the faint smell of regret. But below the drink, names are comments, notes, a strange creeping categorization that makes your skin tingle. Ale number 12, requested by A. Miller 3 hours before confessing infidelity. Later, fell into well. Coincidence uncertain. Cider batch, 6B induces tears in hardened men. May contain onion. Mead reserve, queen's teeth, causes dreams of drowning. Served only to liars. It is then that you realise this isn't a drink list. It's a ledger of consequences. The drinks don't just get you drunk. They do things, predict things, punish things. Mist reappears behind you, as if summoned by your curiosity. Ah, she says lightly, you found Ledger's old notes, still laminated with mead drips and existential despair, I see. You ask cautiously if the drinks are actually cursed. Cursed is such a strong word, she replies, eyes sparkling with mischief. I prefer selectively mischievous. Besides, she didn't brew the curses, she just noticed the pattern. According to Mist, Ledger began as an ordinary girl with an extraordinary obsession for documentation. Every night she watched who ordered what, how much, how quickly, and what happened after. She tracked not just drunken brawls and accidents, but whispers, glances, laughter, confessions, and disappearances. Her records became eerie, too accurate, and disturbingly predictive. Historians still argue whether she was a proto-statistician, a prophet, or just terrifyingly observant. Mist says, wiping down a mug that somehow never gets clean, but one night she wrote something that changed everything. You lean in. She scribbled a single note next to a drink called Ashroot Red. Mist continues, her voice lowering. Not to be served to the man in the wolfskin cloak. Outcome tavern collapse. He frowned, seems oddly specific. And then she says, smiling grimly, a man in a wolfskin cloak walked in. He didn't roar or threaten or foam at the mouth. He simply sat down, removed his gloves, and ordered Ashroot Red. Ledger refused. He insisted. Ledger warned him. He laughed. She poured it anyway. You already know how this ends. The floor didn't crack. The ceiling didn't fall. But the tavern as a place changed. People stopped speaking in full sentences. Their eyes began drifting to corners that didn't exist. Laughter warped like a record played too slow. Someone tried to pay in feathers. Someone else tried to sing in reverse. And then a section of the back wall just disappeared. Not collapsed, evaporated. They said it was a hallucination. Mist shrugs brought on by spoiled grain or bad mushrooms. But funny thing, Ledger never wrote another note after that night. You ask what happened to her. Oh, she's still here, Mist says with eerie cheer. Just not above the floorboards. You pause. What do you mean? She knocks on the bar 3 times slowly. There's a muffled thud in response from beneath your feet. That's the filing system, she says, nonchalant. Taverns always had a memory. Ledger's just maintaining it from below now. You don't ask how someone ends up in the floor. You already know the answer won't help you sleep. Instead, you glance back at the list. Some of the notes are dated centuries ago, but others are fresh, too fresh. And there near the bottom in neat ink, guest in grey cloak. Entered during storm, unregistered arrival, smells of curiosity. Recommend dilution with weak ale until further assessment. Mist peers over your shoulder and smirks. Guess that's you. You want to deny it. You want to say that you're just passing through, not part of any plan or pattern or sinister drink experiment. But you already know better. You feel it in your bones, that slight tremor of being watched by something that doesn't blink. You sit down. Hard, the mug in front of you wobbles ominously. Drink, Mist says softly. Ledger's rule: the only way out is through, 1 sip at a time. You stare at the amber liquid. It's too clear, too self-aware. You tilt it toward your lips, and for a moment you hear scratching beneath the floor. Not rats, not pipes, scratching in rhythm. You down the drink. It's bitter biting and filled with flavours that aren't quite edible. Lavender maybe, or ash, or ink, and then the room tilts. Not the floor, the concept of direction itself. Because now you're remembering things again, but not your own memories, someone else's, a girl's. Sitting in a corner, eyes flicking from drink to drink, handwriting so fast her knuckles bled. Watching, recording, knowing. She's whispering now. He's coming, she says, the man with the third eye. He drinks only what no one else dares order. And then you're back in your seat sweating. Your mug is empty. Mist is watching you. Looks like you saw something useful, she says. That's good, we'll need it. Because the next girl, she didn't serve drinks. She brewed people. You stare at her. Brewed people. You don't answer her right away. You just sit there, letting the words settle into the space between your ribs. And your reason like spilled candle wax, slow hot and impossible to scrape out. She brewed people. It's not a phrase that lends itself to easy digestion, and certainly not with the aftertaste of Ledger's ink-tainted ale still coating your tongue. Mist doesn't clarify, of course. She simply turns and walks toward a crooked wooden door behind the bar, the kind of door that shouldn't open, because it's warped and swollen with age and probably secrets. But of course it does for her. She doesn't beckon. She knows you'll follow. That's the thing about people like her. They don't ask. They just move and the world rearranges itself behind them. The room she leads you into smells like honey mould and wet wood that never fully dried after the last flood. The ceiling is low, the air is thick, and the barrels lining the walls aren't labelled with drink names, but with dates. Not years, moments. You scan them. First lie to a lover confession, before drowning, child's last lullaby, the scream that froze the town square. Your throat closes. She didn't believe in ingredients. Mist says, running her fingers along a barrel labelled Mother's Final Warning. Not the usual ones, no hops, no barley, just fragments. You don't ask where the fragments came from. You're not sure you want the answer, but Mist provides it anyway, because of course she does. The third girl, her name was Rue, believed that every strong emotion left a residue in the world, a flavour, a scent, a chemical signature. And if you knew how to harvest it, you could bottle it, brew it, serve it. You blink, like alchemy. Mist shrugs. If alchemists had better taste in aprons and worse taste in ethics, sure. She explains that Rue came from somewhere cold and quiet, a place where people whispered more than they spoke and buried their dead in wine barrels to keep the wolves from digging too deeply. Her first brew wasn't meant for public consumption. It was personal, a mixture of grief and betrayal, extracted from a pillow, still damp with tears. She boiled it over a fire made from old prayer books and stirred it with a comb that had belonged to her sister. The result? A drink that made everyone in the tavern weep uncontrollably for 7 hours straight. And not sad weeping. Miss clarifies, opening one of the barrels and sniffing. Unexplained weeping. One man claimed he missed a dog he'd never owned. Another swore he remembered being born, and he was furious about it. You smile, a little, because as disturbing as this all is, there's something grimly comical about a room full of hardened peasants, crying over non-existent pets and existential injustice. Historians still argue whether Rue was mad-gifted or just drunk on her own supply. Mist adds, reaching into a small chest and pulling out a vial filled with a liquid the colour of bruised plum. Personally, I think she was lonely. You have to be to spend that much time extracting human essence from broken objects and faded letters. She hands you the vial. You hesitate. Of course you do. Drinking mystery liquids in cellars filled with haunted memory barrels is generally frowned upon in polite society. But this isn't polite society. You uncap it. The scent is indescribable. Not because it's vague, but because it's too precise. It smells like the hallway of your childhood home after your father left. Like your first real failure. Like that moment last winter when you pretended not to see someone crying in the street. It's personal, but impossible, because how could this bottle know any of that? Mist watches as you take a sip. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't burn, but it unfolds. Your thoughts, normally neat and linear, suddenly loop back on themselves, colliding with things you'd shelved years ago. You see yourself young, running from a barn fire you may or may not have started. You hear a voice call your name, not your name now, but one you'd long since buried. And behind it all, faintly Rue's laughter. She never showed her face during the day, Mist says, only brewed at night, said the moonlight helped pull memories loose, claimed sunlight made her concoctions too honest, too simple. She wasn't making drinks for clarity, she was making potions of ambiguity. You ask what happened to her. Mist leans on the barrel, her voice low. One night she tried to bottle hope, thought it would taste like honey and rosemary and first kisses. Instead, it exploded. Not dramatically, just softly, like a breath that didn't finish. You ask if she died. Mist shakes her head. No, she just stopped speaking. People say she poured her voice into the keg. To this day, if you drink from barrel 13 and say something cruel, you lose your ability to lie for a week. You glance to your left. Barrel 13 is right there, and its lid is ajar. You don't touch it. Rue never left the tavern, Miss says. She's still here in pieces, in bottles, in regrets. She points to a dusty shelf with 3 unlabeled jars. One of those is her. We're just not sure which one. You exhale slowly. So she brewed people. Mist shakes her head again. No, she brewed what people leave behind. And some things, as it turns out, really shouldn't be preserved. The door creaks behind you. Not the one you came through, but a different one. One you didn't see before. From it, a faint hum emerges, and the scent of smoke and scorched paper. Mist turns frowning. That means she's awake. The next one. You swallow. Who's next? She grimaces. The girl who burned the king's wedding. And just like that, the fire in the main tavern flares. There are many kinds of fire. The one that flickers now in the hearth out front is the kind that whispers warnings in crackles and sparks, like it's trying to remember the shape of a scream. It casts long, writhing shadows across the warped tavern walls, and you realise that no one, not the drinkers, not the dog, not even the snoring man, has moved in a while. Not because they're frozen, because they're listening. Mist doesn't speak immediately. She walks back through the door and drops a small satchel onto the bar. It lands with a metallic jangle and a soft clink like coins or teeth. Before you ask, she mutters they were hers. You open your mouth. Not her own teeth, she sighs, just ones she collected. Souvenirs mostly. Kings, priests, that sort. Not for trophies, she claimed it helped her remember who not to trust. This apparently is your introduction to the fourth beer girl. She didn't like the name they gave her, Mist says, so she gave them a different one, in return humiliation. Her name, though, no one dared say it twice, was Elska. Born into a family with too many brothers and not enough bread, she learned early that ale didn't just make men drunk, it made them talk, made them listen, and sometimes made them confess things that no trial ever could extract. She got her start brewing at weddings, Miss says, already pouring you something that smells like burned honey and misplaced loyalty. You'd think love would be safe territory, but the problem with weddings C is expectation. It curdles faster than cream if you look at it wrong. Elska's specialty was a particular type of celebratory ale called Crown Shade. It was floral, subtle, lightly spiced, and horrifyingly effective. Not in the way that got people drunk. No Crown Shade exposed intent. You drink it thinking you were toasting joy, and instead find yourself saying things like, I don't love her, I just didn't want to marry below station, or I only came for the roast pig, or in one famous case, I poisoned the bishop last winter, and I'd do it again. Mist sips from her own glass. The first time Elska served Crown Shade, the wedding ended in 3 duels, 1 spontaneous annulment, and a goat being elected mayor. You cough on your drink. Mist doesn't react. She's clearly heard that one before. Of course people blame the drink. That was easier than blaming the truth. And for a while, Elska was banned from all celebratory functions across 5 provinces. But kings have short memories when they're desperate. And it wasn't long before she was summoned to brew for the royal wedding. And she said yes, Mist says with a glint in her eye. Because of course she did. She said yes, the way a storm says yes to a dry field. The wedding of King Aldric the Toothsome to Lady Miraval of the Eastern Marches was meant to unite rival houses, end a long-standing salt tax feud, and most importantly provide nobles with something to gossip about for the next 10 years. What they got instead was a history lesson served in ceramic tankards and accompanied by the slow unravelling of every alliance secret and petty insult ever whispered beneath a banquet table. Mist pulls a dusty bottle from beneath the counter. Its wax seal bears the faint impression of a crown, split down the middle. She served it only once, she murmurs, the night of the wedding. The ale was light, fragrant, deceptively innocent. But once it reached the bloodstream, it acted like heat on wax masks, melting the layers nobles had spent lifetimes painting on. Laughter gave way to tears, to rage, to shouted accusations of betrayal over land lineage and a shared lover named Joris, whom 3 barons swore had different eye colours. By the time the cake arrived, the bride had eloped with her chambermaid. The groom had locked himself in the wine cellar, and 2 dukes were naked and sword-fighting in the reflecting pool. They tried to arrest her, Mist adds with a shrug, but she'd already gone. Gone, yes, but not far. Elska didn't flee, she simply shifted. Some say she took on a new name and brewed quietly in roadside inns, disguising her recipes under safer titles, like Honey Rest or Bridal Mercy. Others think she went underground literally, and now concocts drinks that can undo entire political marriages with just 1 sip. You ask Mist if Elska was ever caught. She laughs dry, hollow, like wind through bones. You can't catch a woman who turns words into weapons and mixes her morality into the mash. And anyway, she leans in. Every tavern has a back room that shouldn't exist. That's where she waits for the next invitation. You stare down at your drink. It looks normal, pale, slightly foamy, hints of rosemary, and something floral underneath. But now you're wondering what truth it's waiting to extract from you. Mist watches your hesitation with amusement. Elska always said that alcohol was just honesty in liquid form. But hers had memory, intention, and teeth. You drink. Of course you do. And for a moment, just a breath, you swear you're standing in a great hall. Laughter echoes, but it's wrong, too loud, too forced. Someone nearby is weeping into a velvet sleeve. You hear your own voice say something you've never admitted aloud. And then you're back in the tavern, Mist pouring another round. She always left one keg behind, Mist says casually. She said it was for the reckoning. And since you're here, you raise an eyebrow. You're saying I'm the reckoning? She shrugs. Not yet, but give it time. You almost ask what happens if you refuse the next drink. But you already know, because the keg behind her is marked with your name, spelled correctly, and no one here ever asked how to spell it. Next girl, Mist says, was called Finch. She didn't serve ale, she served silence. And for the first time since you entered the tavern, goes utterly, completely quiet. Silence in a tavern is not natural. It doesn't settle gently, like snow, or drift in like fog. It arrives with tension, with the precision of a knife drawn in a quiet room, and the unmistakable sense that something is about to go very wrong. It is an unnatural, full-bodied kind of quiet, the kind that presses on your lungs and makes every clink of a mug or shift of a chair feel like a sin. It's into this void that Mist speaks again, her voice lowered as if she's not just narrating a memory, but offering you a warning disguised as a bedtime story. Finch wasn't her name, she says, eyes focused on the hearth, as if it might suddenly whisper back. It was what they called her, because she never said more than necessary. And when she did speak, you'd wish she hadn't. You raise your mug and realise too late that it's empty. Not dry, but empty, as in, you can't remember ever having drunk what was in it. You feel mildly cheated by this. Mist takes another slow breath and continues. She was small, bird-like, always perched in corners or behind barrels, but she heard everything. I don't mean like gossip or flirtation. I mean everything. Plans, threats, lies you told yourself while smiling into your own reflection. She wasn't born with this gift, they say. She acquired it the way some people acquire debts or enemies quietly over time and with a deeply unfortunate consequence. No one knew how she did it. Historians, those poor dry-boned creatures in libraries, still debate whether she was a trained spy, a curse-bound oracle, or simply a woman who listened so carefully to others that the world decided to listen back. She first appeared in a town where secrets were more common than bread. The bread was mouldy, the secrets were fresh. At first, no one noticed her, just another girl refilling mugs, mopping floors, moving like steam through a cracked wall. But then she started serving a new drink, one without a name, clear cold, poured in silence, and handed to patrons with a glance that felt surgical. People drank it, because of course they did. They always do, even in this cursed reality, where history is rewritten in yeast and prophecy bubbles in the froth. People still drink things that shouldn't be touched, because the thirst to know or to forget always outweighs common sense. They called it still glass. It didn't make you talk. It didn't make you confess. It didn't even get you drunk. It did something far worse. It made you hear your own thoughts without filter, without excuse, as if your mind had been cleaned out and amplified and then locked in a room with itself. For some, it was a spiritual revelation. For others, a collapse. At least 2 priests burned their own robes in the town square, screaming about false absolution. One baron began communicating exclusively through sobs and interpretive dance. And a widow from the outskirts took a vow of silence, so severe she hasn't blinked in 12 years. Finch never smiled. She never explained. She only served. Mist slides a small tumbler toward you now. Its glass unusual in this place of clay and wood, and filled with what appears to be nothing at all. You pick it up. It is perfectly impossibly still. No condensation, no scent, no weight, like you're holding an idea. She made a batch once, Mist says slowly, for a king who was afraid of betrayal. He demanded something that would let him know who to trust. Finch warned him. She always warned them. But he insisted, so she served him still glass distilled from the thoughts of his own advisors. You ask what happened. He murdered them all, Mist replies with a shrug. Turns out no one ever really agrees with a king, and hearing their unspoken doubts echoing in his skull every time he closed his eyes, well, it didn't end well. You ask what happened to Finch. Mist pauses. She didn't leave. She just withdrew. She stopped speaking entirely. Claimed that even her own voice had started lying. She only communicates now through coasters. One word per drink carved in with the tip of a raven's feather. You glance around the bar. Sure enough, one of the coasters beneath your mug bears the word almost. You check another too late. Another says she no. You stop looking. She started using her drinks to filter sound, Mist says. Not to mute it, but to catch it. Preserve it. A good brew from Finch can hold a single whispered phrase, like an insect in amber. She pulls a bottle from beneath the counter. It's sealed with wax and string, and it hums softly like a kettle just beginning to boil. This one's got a marriage proposal from 1347 in it, she says, tapping it lightly. Still unaccepted. There's a kind of sad comedy to that, you think. A love that echoes for centuries, caught in a bottle that no one dares open. And yet you suspect someone eventually will. Someone always does. Curiosity is an affliction with no cure. You drink what Mist pours for you. You don't feel anything at first. Then you realise your ears are ringing, not painfully, but like someone whispered your name from across a canyon. Then come the thoughts, not new, not foreign, but yours served back to you in stereo. Why did you come here? What are you trying to prove? What are you still hiding, even from yourself? It passes, you blink. Mist is watching you again. She always said that noise is what we hide behind. And when you strip it away, you find out who you're actually drinking with. You try to respond, but your voice catches, not with emotion, with something else, something waiting. Mist raises an eyebrow. Don't worry, it wears off, mostly. Just don't try to lie for the next hour. Finch's brews don't forgive. You nod mutely, because even if you could speak, you wouldn't trust what would come out. Not yet. The tavern begins to stir again gently, as if released from a held breath. Mist pours another drink, darker this time, thicker, with a scent like old wood, and something iron-rich beneath it. Next up, she says softly, is the girl who brewed absence. She served only to the forgotten. And once you drank her ale, no one would remember your name. She hands you the mug. It's already halfway empty. There's something disconcerting about holding a drink that's already half gone when you don't recall lifting it. Not in the usual ha-ha you drank too much sense, but in a deeper, more chilling way, as if time itself took a sip while you blinked, or worse, something that never had a mouth left you, a reminder that you weren't paying attention. Mist doesn't comment on your confusion. She only tilts her head slightly, as though observing a mouse figuring out it's already in the trap. Then with the delicacy of someone setting down a relic, too dangerous to touch directly, she places a second mug beside yours. It too is half empty, but this one is marked not with a name, but with a single spiral carved into the handle, worn smooth, finger-shaped. She never had a name, Mist says quietly. Not because she lacked one, but because no one who met her could remember it long enough to write it down. You raise an eyebrow. She nods. They tried. One man tattooed it on his chest, woke up the next morning and couldn't understand why he had a bruise in the shape of a question mark. She was called Whisper when she was called anything at all. The seventh girl. Not the loudest, not the brightest, but certainly the most effective if your goal was to vanish without dying. Her arrival was unremarkable. No storm, no omens. Just a girl walking in from the fog with a single pack slung across her back and eyes like wet stone. Not sad, just heavily silent. She ordered no drink. She simply stared at the bar until the innkeeper, who had run the tavern for 32 years and prided himself on remembering the name of every goat in the village, forgot she was there and went back to washing mugs that no longer needed it. According to Mist, Whisper had a gift, or maybe a curse. She brewed beers that didn't erase memory, not directly, but detoured it, bent it, took your presence and filed it under not urgent in the collective consciousness. After a pint of her drink, you wouldn't be invisible. People would see you, hear you, talk to you, but 5 minutes after you left, they'd forget you were ever there. 10, and they'd doubt you existed at all. An hour later, they'd swear they'd made you up. But don't mistake her for lonely. Mist adds, watching your expression carefully. She wanted that. She drank her own brew every morning, said being remembered was too heavy a burden. You try to imagine that kind of life, one in which every connection you make evaporates behind you, like steam from a forgotten kettle. It doesn't feel liberating. It feels like being haunted by your own absence. She was a listener like Finch, but worse, Mist continues. Because Whisper didn't just hear what people said. She understood what they feared being forgotten about. You glance down at your half-drunk mug. It's cool now. Not cold, but disconnected, like something left behind by a traveller who didn't say goodbye. Historians don't talk about her mistads because they can't. Every recorded mention of her has faded, turned to smudges or half-finished thoughts in journals. One scholar tried to catalogue her brews. Last he was seen, he was arguing with a well about whether he existed, the well won. Still some traces remain. Recipes without authors, bottles without labels hidden in cupboards no one remembers building. And occasionally, when someone truly wants to disappear, not die, not run, just slip out of the narrative, Whisper's mug finds them. Not the girl herself. Just the mug. And when it appears, they know what to do. You ask Mist if she ever drank it. Her silence is answer enough. She served one last round, she finally says, to a man who came in with no shadow. You blink, no shadow. Mist nods, not metaphorically, literally. He walked into the light and left no shape behind. Said he needed to forget himself, not just others. Whisper poured him a double. He drank it, smiled, and said it had no taste at all. Then he vanished. You ask what happened to her. She followed him. Mist replies, not sadly. No fanfare, no farewell. She simply closed the tap, folded her apron, and walked out the door. No one remembers what happened next, including me. I only know she left because when I woke up, her mug was still warm. You sit in silence for a while, watching the fire sway, as if it too is trying to recall someone it once knew. You wonder briefly if anyone in your life has already drunk her ale, a friend who slipped away too easily, a parent whose stories you stopped remembering before they were finished. Or maybe someone else, someone you've forgotten but shouldn't have. Mist taps your mug. Last sip, she says gently. You drink, and for just a moment the world becomes blurry, not visually, but emotionally. You remember everyone you've ever lost, not their faces, not their voices, just the shape they left in your life, the dent in your memory, like a chair recently vacated, and just as quickly it fades. Mist doesn't say anything. She just slides another mug toward you. This one is different wooden, but bound in iron bands. It hums with something, sharp. Not magical, not supernatural, just intentional. Next, she says softly, is the girl who named every shadow in the tavern and taught them to speak back. You look around. You could swear one just nodded. There's a particular kind of shadow that doesn't behave the way it should. Not the playful stretch across floorboards as the fire flickers, not the lazy drift under tables when someone shifts, but the sort of shadow that lingers even when its owner leaves. The kind that stays a beat too long after motion has ceased or bends slightly in the wrong direction, as if it's trying to make a point or worse, hold a grudge. Mist doesn't blink as she places the iron-bound mug in front of you. The wood is dark with age, scratched deeply, as though something with claws, not metaphorical ones, once tried to pry it open. She doesn't offer a toast this time. She only says, she called them by name. That was the mistake. You don't ask whose mistake it was. The eighth girl, Mist says, tracing one of the claw marks with her thumbnail, was called Wren, though no one could agree whether that was her actual name or just the only one the shadows would answer to. Wren, as the tail and the stains on the ceiling suggest, did not stumble into the art of shadow binding by accident. She didn't inherit it from some wandering crone, didn't discover it, scribbled in the margins of a cursed tome. No, she asked. And worse, she listened when they answered. She believed Mist begins that every tavern has layers, not rooms, not floors, layers, memories, residue, footprints of conversations that didn't want to die. And she claimed the shadows knew the truth because they were the only ones who never left. At first, people assumed Wren was just odd, harmless, eccentric, and possessed of the strange calm common among those who make eye contact with ravens and are frequently overheard laughing at soup. But then she began drawing diagrams. Not maps, not sigils, diagrams of where silence fell in the tavern, where stories hesitated, where lies were most often told, and always her diagrams started with the placement of shadows. She didn't just observe them, she recorded their behaviour like a scholar cataloguing wild beasts. She noticed which ones moved against firelight, which ones gathered behind dishonest men, which ones inexplicably leaned forward when someone cried. Historians still argue whether she was mad possessed or simply several centuries ahead of her time. Mist says, her voice dry as spilled ash. Personally, I think she got lonely and decided to make friends out of the parts of reality no one else acknowledged. You ask cautiously what it means to name a shadow. Mist leans forward. It means you're giving it permission to answer. The first one she named was called Burl. She found him behind a stack of barrels in the far left corner, the one you instinctively avoid without ever quite knowing why. She offered him a drink, not in jest. She poured a measure of still glass onto the floor and whispered, "For you." The next day, that corner was warmer. People sat there who never had before. A couple kissed under the rafters overhead. A child laughed. People thought she'd banished something, Mist says, but no, she'd just taught it manners. It escalated. Of course it did. She began hosting a shadow roll call. Once a week at dusk, she'd ring a cracked bell and recite names into the darkened corners. Names like Ivan Crick Hollow, Sam and the boy made of breaths. Sometimes the fire dimmed when she spoke them. Sometimes it flared. And sometimes Mist adds the fire just moved. You ask what happened to her. She made the mistake of naming one too many. Mist says, voice lowered now. She called it Not Me. That's what it said its name was. The problem with names like that is they're not descriptors, they're instructions. You feel the hair on your arm shift not from wind or temperature, but from recognition. Something just brushed the edge of your perception. Not touched. Brushed, like a thought you didn't think passing too close to your own. Wren wasn't seen again. Not vanished exactly. She still appeared in mirrors occasionally, mostly when people were lying to themselves. But she no longer had a shadow of her own. She'd given it away, Mist says. Or maybe it took her place. Or maybe she became one. We stopped keeping track. The math got philosophical. Still her drinks remained. Wren brewed with ink. Not metaphorically actual ink. Shadow brewed, she called it. A blend of black barley, charred rosemary soot, and borrowed stillness. Those who drank it often found themselves speaking truths they'd never considered. Not painful truths, just inconvenient ones. A merchant once admitted he didn't know how to read, and had been bartering entirely on tone of voice. A soldier confessed he'd always been afraid of horses. A noble woman admitted she hated music, and had faked her enjoyment for 15 years. You pick up the mug. The iron band is warm somehow. The ale inside is not black but grey like the sky before a storm. You should have prepared for but didn't. Mist watches. You drink. The flavour is dense, smoky, faintly metallic, like breathing in burnt parchment. And for a few seconds nothing happens. Then your shadow moves. You don't, but it does. Not dramatically, just a twitch, a tiny wave, almost playful. Mist doesn't blink. Don't worry, she says, it's just saying hello. You set the mug down with exaggerated caution. Don't make eye contact, she adds, almost as an afterthought. They take that personally. A beat of silence. Then, a long creak as something shifts in the rafters. Not a rat, not a board, something heavier, something that breathes, but only when no one listens. Wren left one last rule, Mist says. She said, if the shadows ever start asking questions, don't answer. You ask what happens if you do. She just smiles. That's what the next girl learned. She thought the whispers were rumours. Turns out they were invitations. You feel something lean closer behind you. The next drink is already at your elbow, and it's whispering your name. The drink whispers your name, not out loud, not in the theatrical, ghost in the glass sort of way, but inside your skull like an echo looking for its origin. It's subtle at first, just a suggestion that maybe your name isn't yours anymore, or perhaps never was, and that someone or something else has just now claimed the lease on your identity. You glance at Mist, who seems entirely untroubled by the fact that your beverage appears to have agency. She's polishing a spoon with the same focus and gravity as a priest preparing a holy relic, except that the spoon looks slightly bent and has a tiny rune etched into the handle that pulses when you blink. She wasn't meant to stay long, Mist says, setting the spoon down, with the delicacy of someone who knows spoons shouldn't hum, but then again, none of them were. The ninth girl arrived wrapped in rumours and wearing the kind of grin usually reserved for people who know they're about to ruin someone's life for the better. Her name, at least the one she chose to share, was Kiva. She sold beer the way a bard sells a ballad, dramatically, often inaccurately, and always with a twinkle in the eye that promised the truth would eventually catch up, probably in a back alley holding a club. But her real business wasn't pouring drinks. It was information. Kiva didn't invent gossip, Mist explains, she just industrialised it. She arrived with a basket of bread rolls and a proposition. Every mug of ale came with a complimentary loaf, crusty on the outside, soft in the middle, and stuffed with secrets. Not metaphorically, literally. Love letters, Mist says, tapping the rim of your mug. Blackmail notes, coded maps, recipes banned by the Abbey. The occasional severance notice written in poetic verse. If you bit into her bread, you either found butter or a reason to run. You ask how that worked exactly. Mist snorts softly. Kiva understood 3 things, she says. 1, people are nosy. 2, people talk when they eat. And 3, no one questions, a girl bringing carbs to the table. The rolls became a local phenomenon. People ordered them compulsively, even those with gluten-based trauma. It wasn't about hunger, it was about discovery. The thrill of breaking open warm dough to find a scandal, a whispered confession, or a half-burnt contract hidden inside. Some notes were meant for others, of course, but most found what they needed, even if it wasn't what they wanted. One man opened a roll to find a drawing of his own house on fire with the caption 3 days. He moved. The house didn't burn, but his neighbours did, and the insurance clerk was never found. One time, Mist adds a travelling monk bit into a cinnamon bun and found half a sermon wrapped around a lock of his own hair. He hadn't even noticed it was missing. Kiva didn't deliver these notes herself. That was the genius. She baked the delivery system. She created a network of flirtatious, sharp-eyed girls who moved through the tavern with trays of pastries and tankards, collecting whispers and redistributing them like karmic mail. And the beer girls, they were in on it. All of them. Not just messengers, curators. Each beer girl had a specialty. One tracked infidelity, another handled smuggling routes, a third who claimed to be descended from a line of royal executioners dealt exclusively in exit strategies. The tavern became a living archive of sins, hopes, and failed poetry, all wrapped in crust and washed down with fermented clarity. Historians still argue whether Kiva was running a resistance network, a matchmaking service, or an emotional terrorism campaign, Mist says, pouring you a dark ale that smells faintly of rosemary and ink. But whatever it was, it worked, until it didn't. You take the mug. It's warm, not just in temperature, but in tone, like something had been waiting to be held. You sip. The flavour is complex, earthy, slightly smoky. There's an undercurrent of sweetness, like burnt sugar, and something floral you can't quite place. Lavender maybe, or betrayal. Mist watches you. It all fell apart when someone bit into a roll and found nothing. You raise an eyebrow. Not just blank parchment, she explains. Absence, a vacuum, a hole. The man who bit into it forgot who he was. He didn't panic, he just stood up, walked outside, and has never been seen again. They say Kiva tried to trace the error, tried to figure out which girl placed the roll, which baker kneaded the dough, which letter was supposed to be inside. But none of them remembered. Not a blank space, missing time. 3 hours, gone. After that, the bread stopped. No more rolls, no more letters, just beer and silence, and one last note nailed to the bar in the middle of the night. Mist produces it from beneath the counter, folded and faded. It reads, "Not everything baked can be unbaked." You ask what happened to her. She left behind a recipe, Mist replies. A drink brewed with flour, ink, and the ashes of written lies. No one's dared make it, but the instructions are still hanging in the pantry, behind the jar of fingers, labelled decaf. You nod slowly, uncertain whether you're more disturbed by the drink or the label. So you murmur she weaponized pastries. She weaponized attention, Mist corrects. And now that you've drunk her brew, you'll start noticing things you didn't before. Connections, repetitions, names whispered too often. Eyes that look at you too long. You pause. Like yours, you say quietly. She just smiles. The shadows twitch. A breeze rolls through the tavern, but no windows are open. Mist reaches for the next bottle. This one is sealed in wax that hums, not vibrates, hums like a lullaby sung in reverse. This next girl, she says, brewed only in blood moons. She believed memory was a disease, and she served her cure cured out. You try to protest, but your voice catches in your throat, chilled by something that hasn't touched you yet, but already knows where you hurt. The cork pops, the light dims, and the ale remembers you. It begins not with the drink, but with the moon. The kind of moon that doesn't simply hang in the sky, but looms like it has opinions, grievances, and possibly a tally of your worst decisions. It is red tonight. Not warm red like hearth glow or sunset blush, but a colder, angrier hue like old rust or dried blood beneath a fingernail. The bottle before you is black glass, opaque even in firelight, and bound in wax, that sings a sound that begins in your ears and ends somewhere behind your eyes where the memories live. Not the good ones, the ones you've wrapped in cotton and shoved behind locked doors, hoping they would dissolve on their own. They haven't. Mist touches the bottle gently. She said memory was contagious, that it infected everything, language, gesture, posture. She believed forgetting was the only true act of healing, not letting go, unhappening. You frown. That's not how memory works. Mist smirks. You're assuming she agreed. Her name was Sorrel. And if you ask the right people, the ones who mumble into their sleeves when the moon turns red, she wasn't a beer girl at all, but something older wearing the shape of a woman and the apron of a brewer. She didn't pour drinks from kegs. She ladled them from vats sealed with bone and prayer. And her customers never asked for second rounds. Not because they didn't want more, because they couldn't remember ordering the first. She brewed forgetting, Mist says. Not amnesia, not confusion. Absence, pure and polished as obsidian. Her drinks didn't blur the past, they excised it. You ask why anyone would want that. Because some memories rot, she replies simply. They sour in the mind, grow mould across the soul. Sorrel believed memory was like spoiled meat. The longer you kept it, the more it poisoned you. She had rules, always 3. Drink only when the moon is full. Do not speak the names of those you wish to forget. Never ever look into the dregs. And yet, of course, people broke every single one, because desperation overrides caution every time. You get desperate enough, you'll do anything to erase the shape of someone from the inside of your ribs. Sorrel's ale, called No More, looked like smoke trapped in liquid. It curled inside the mug, shifting never still. And the first sip brought only silence. Not around you, inside. A moment of perfect suffocating peace. That was the trick. Because only after the silence came the holes. Small at first, a birthday forgotten, a lover's favourite song erased, a smell that once meant safety turning to static, then larger, faces lost, years misplaced. A man once drank a full tankard and forgot his own name, but still remembered that he'd once had someone he loved, though not whether they were real or imagined. He wept for 3 days, and then forgot why he was crying. You can't choose what disappears, Mist says. That was the price. Sorrel never promised control, only relief. Historians, though, they struggle even to pin down the town, where she brewed debate whether she was a trauma healer, a psychological assassin, or a walking plague. Some think she was a failed nun who turned her penance into a brewery. Others claim she was the daughter of a witch who tried to erase her own bloodline, one sip at a time. Whatever the truth, her drinks always came chilled. Not with ice, with intent. Cold because they removed warmth from your memories, stripped them of shape and scent and texture, until all that remained was a blank wall, where once there had been a mural. You're staring at the bottle now. You hadn't noticed Mist uncork it. The smell is familiar, not comforting familiar. The scent of a room you left years ago, the one with the letter you never mailed. She pours you half a glass, just enough. You hesitate. Everyone does, Mist, says, folding her arms, and then they drink anyway. You take a sip. It is nothing. It is everything. It is the taste of snow falling on a night you forgot how to dream. It is the feel of a hand slipping from yours just before the door shut. It is the moment when the name you whispered every night vanished from your tongue, and for a moment the weight lifts. You can breathe. And then it returns. Not the memory, the space, where it used to be. Like a missing tooth your tongue keeps finding. You can't remember what you lost, but you know you lost it. You set the glass down with hands that feel older than they should. Mist is watching, but not cruelly. She looks like someone who's seen too many people try to remove the wrong part of themselves. Some came back broken, she says. Others came back lighter. But Sorrel, she never came back at all. She served one final drink, to herself. You whisper the question. And what did she forget? Mist's smile is sharp. Her name, her body, her place in the story. She's still here, I think. Not in the walls, in the gaps, in the pauses between words, in the names that vanish from your tongue right when you need them. You look toward the corner where a chair has always been empty, except now you think it might not be. Mist reaches below the bar. She retrieves a mug unlike the others, cracked-rimmed in ash, and humming with a faint musical tone, like someone tapping on glass from beneath the surface of a pond. She left behind one thing, Mist says, voice low. A drink that doesn't make you forget. It makes you remember what was erased, but once seen it can't be unseen. You reach for it. Your hand trembles. She stops you. Not yet, she says. You're not ready. You still have one more girl to meet. You ask, who? Mist's smile fades. The one who burned down this tavern. Twice. And behind you the fire flares. The fire behind you crackles, not in the cozy storybook sense, but with a sound like parchment being shredded by unseen hands. It swells not in heat, but in presence, as though it's become aware of the conversation, and would like very much to be included. You don't turn around. You've learned better. In this place, what you look at too closely might just look back. Mist doesn't seem disturbed by the sudden change in temperature or tone. She leans slightly over the bar, fingertips tapping a rhythm you don't recognize, but somehow find yourself counting along with 1, 2, 3 pause, as though it's the rhythm of a lock being picked or a fuse being lit. She didn't mean to burn it. Mist begins her voice, a touch too calm for what you know is coming next. The first time, at least. You wrap both hands around the newest mug placed before you. It's warm, but in a different way, less like a fire and more like a fever that hasn't broken yet. The liquid inside is thick, the colour of scorched gold, and it smells like smoke salt and something medicinal, as though someone tried to distill both punishment and forgiveness into a bottle and then left it too close to the edge of the stove. Her name was Feyre, and unlike the others, she arrived with nothing. No bag, no story, not even a pair of shoes. Just a charred apron, a splintered grin, and the kind of laugh that made the bravest patrons instinctively check their pockets for missing time. She didn't ask for work. She simply walked behind the bar one day, removed a pot from the coals and said, "This place doesn't boil right. Let me fix that." Mist pours herself a matching mug but doesn't drink. She never drinks from this batch. Farah believed brewing was about volatility, Mist says. She said beer was a living thing, and that like all living things, it either grows or it erupts. Her brews were infamous, not for their flavour, which was by all reports startling, but tolerable, but for their effects. Farah's drinks were not meant to be consumed in silence. They demanded to be sung to. If you drank alone, they fizzled. If you toasted loudly with strangers, they ignited figuratively, and on at least 3 occasions, literally. Her most infamous concoction was called Red Wake, made from barley scorched in lightning-struck oak, and stirred with a ladle carved from the mast of a drowned ship. It was an ale so unstable that the cask was chained to the floor. You had to yell your name at it before tapping. It required a declaration, as though the drink needed to know who to blame. Historians still argue whether she was an arsonist with a brewing hobby or a brewer with an arson problem. Miss says, half smiling. But either way, the result was the same every town she served in, either built a new tavern or rebuilt the old one. You sip your drink. It tastes wrong, not bad, just unfinished, like something still in the middle of becoming something else, bitter sweet then bitter again. It burns not down your throat but in your memories, as if someone's whispering, "Remember this," but also you'll regret it. Mist watches you closely. The first fire started because someone insulted her ale, not rudely, just carelessly. Called it a bit smoky. You wince. She didn't argue. She just went quiet, stirred the pot 3 more times, poured herself a mug, drank it and walked out. 20 minutes later, the rafters caught flame, the beer turned to steam, and the ceiling sang hymns no one had taught it. The fire was extinguished eventually. No one died, but the villagers were never quite the same. Some forgot how to taste salt, others began writing poetry in their sleep. One man spoke only in riddles for the rest of his life, insisting he'd heard Farah whisper the true name of fire. They begged her not to return, Mist says, which of course meant she did, the second time they were ready, or thought they were. Fireproofed the walls, dug trenches, installed bells. Farah didn't bring matches, she brought a question. She asked every patron a single thing. What would you burn if no one could stop you? They laughed. At first gave clever answers, a hated cousin, an unfair tax ledger, an entire kingdom's fashion sense. But the drink she served that night, cinder speech, was brewed not from barley, but from soot-broken promises and flakes of burned confession. The tavern caught fire from the inside, not the walls, the words. Everything anyone had ever muttered under their breath in anger flared to life in the open air. Arguments combusted, jealousy blistered. A man who had once cursed his father during a thunderstorm found his voice literally on fire. They say the barkeep coughed up smoke until dawn, and Farah, she stood in the centre untouched, calmly sipping her ale and humming the same 3-note tune that the rafters had sung during the first blaze. You realise with a sick twist that the fire behind you has started matching her rhythm. Mist doesn't smile now. She didn't mean to destroy things, she says. She believed fire purified, that it told the truth no one else dared speak. You glance at your drink again. The mug is warm, now hot. The ale inside shimmers, not like heat rising, but like something shifting form. She left one last brew behind. Mist adds, her voice lowered. Untapped, locked in the coldest part of the cellar. She called it ashlight, said it wasn't for drinking unless the tavern ever forgot why it existed. You ask what that meant. Mist looks at the flames, which now dance higher, brighter, as if eavesdropping. She believed taverns weren't built for warmth. Not really. They were built to contain the truth. Loud, violent, inconvenient truth. And when people stop telling the truth, the walls get dry. And dry walls, you realise, burn better. You set your mug down gently as the shadows flicker faster and a strange heat crawls up your spine. Mist slides another drink toward you without a word. It's cold, almost frosted, but wrapped in a napkin with an embroidered phrase. When the tavern disappears, listen for her laugh. You look around. The edges of the room are blurring, not fading, detaching. You ask what's happening. Mist raises an eyebrow. You've reached the end of the ledger, she says. And now, it's your turn. Your hands tremble. But first she says one last story. One final girl. The one who built the tavern in the first place, and never told anyone what she built it to hold. The drink is in your hand before you realise you reached for it. And beneath your feet, the floor begins to breathe. The floor doesn't creak. It inhales, slowly, deeply, as though something ancient beneath the tavern has finally grown curious about the weight of your footsteps, and is stretching after a long, uneasy sleep. And with that breath comes the unmistakable realization that this place, this tavern, this labyrinth of memory and mug is not just a building, it is a container. And containers are only as safe as what they keep out. Mist says nothing for a long time. She just watches as you hold the final drink, its surface still reflective and tinged with the faintest greenish hue like moss on a stone that remembers drowning. The napkin still wrapped around the mug flutters slightly, though there is no breeze. She never gave her name. Mist begins at last, slowly, each word laid down like a stone on a burial path. Not even to the girls who came after. They just called her Foundress, not out of reverence, out of necessity, because naming her invited her back. This then is the last girl, the first in fact, the one who did not stumble into this role by accident or inheritance or misfortune. She built the tavern, from wood no one recognised, on land no one claimed, with blueprints no one drew. She didn't want a home, Mist says. She wanted a threshold, something that stood between the world that people believe in and the one that breathes behind their dreams. You try to ask what that means, but the words dissolve before they leave your mouth. Mist nods, as if she expected that. Foundress was not a brewer in the traditional sense. She did not ferment grain or boil herbs or whisper secrets into the mash. She fermented space, she brewed place. She distilled the boundaries between memory and story and poured them into walls. Her ale didn't intoxicate. It invited, not people, not animals. Stories, living ones, hungry ones, the kind that waited in corners, flickering like firelight, wearing the faces of friends you haven't met yet. She believes stories were alive, Mist says, and that if you gave them a place to gather, they'd behave, like wolves around a shared kill, but only if fed. So she built a tavern, not on crossroads, but on overlaps, places where time folds like bed sheets and geography forgets itself. Places where roads go missing for a while, only to reappear with a different name. This tavern was not a building, it was a narrative sinkhole. And the beer girls, they weren't staff, they were anchors. Each one selected, not by Foundress, but by the tavern itself, called by dreams, misfortune, impulse. Each one bound by something deeper than duty. Each one given a tap, a brew, and a story to watch over. You glance at Mist. She meets your eyes. I didn't start here, she says. I came in looking for my brother. He was lost, and I thought, maybe he'd come in for a drink and stayed for a truth he couldn't carry. You want to ask if she found him. She shakes her head. No, but I found his name scratched beneath a stool in a language I didn't recognise. That was enough, for a while. Foundress never poured a drink. She never spoke above a whisper. But everyone who met her agreed on one thing. When she looked at you, you felt as if your entire life had already been lived, catalogued, and politely declined. She didn't just hold stories, Mist says. She edited them. If a tale became too loud, too hungry, too painful, she'd brew something and serve it back to the teller. Not to heal, to complete, to end. She believed no story should be left unresolved. She feared them when they lingered. The final drink, this one, the one in your hand, was hers. She left it behind in a glass that has never cracked, on a coaster that hasn't aged, wrapped in a napkin, embroidered in a language that predates iron. No one knows the ingredients, only the result. It's not memory mist says, not truth. It's the story of you, the one the tavern has been writing since you walked in. You drink it, and you find out how yours ends. You ask voice low and tight, and if I don't, mist leans back. Then you stay. You become part of someone else's cup, a name that appears in foam, a laugh that echoes too long, a stranger who always seems to be in the background of someone else's dream. You glance around. The tavern has grown still again. Not silent, just watchful, like a room holding its breath before the curtain drops. You raise the mug. It's not heavy, not warm, just ready. You drink. The flavour is impossible to describe. Not because it's complex, but because it's personal. It tastes like the moment you realised you were alone, the night you laughed until you cried, the smell of a hallway that no longer exists, the voice of someone who never really said goodbye. It tastes like you, but older, finished, poured out in full. You exhale. Mist watches, the fire dims, and somewhere softly you hear applause. Not for you, for the story, because it's been told now, complete, closed, and like all complete stories, it leaves a space behind it. Mist raises her glass, to Foundress, to her girls, to you. You feel lighter, not joyous, not unburdened, but concluded. A chapter has ended. Mist reaches beneath the bar and slides forward a small, handwritten note. It says you may leave or stay, but you can't do both. You ask what most people choose. She smiles tired now. They forget they had a choice. And then gently the tavern begins to fade. Not with smoke, not with light, but like the last sentence of a good book, when you close the cover and sit still for a while, wondering who you'll be when you stand up. Because here the ale doesn't just get you drunk, it writes you down. And now your cup is empty. The fire, though smaller now, still flickers softly, its light dancing across empty mugs and fading footprints in sawdust. The chairs creak once, as if sighing. Even the shadows seem tired now, curling into corners like old cats full of stories they're no longer eager to share. You breathe out long and slow. There is no music playing, but the silence has a rhythm, a hush-hush pulse, like the last few heartbeats of a dream before morning creeps in. The air has changed, no longer sharp with smoke or thick with prophecy. Just still, just soft, just enough to remind you that you're somewhere else now, even if your body hasn't moved. This story, like every good brew, has steeped in you, not to intoxicate, but to anchor, to whisper that maybe, just maybe, the strange, the haunted, the half-true stories have a place in the world after all. And maybe that place has a door, a bar, and a girl who knows your name before you say it. And whether you come back here in a dream, in a déjà vu, or in a quiet moment when your tea tastes too much like memory, you'll remember. The tavern waits, not for you, but for the next story. And now it's time to sleep. Let the mug rest. Let the shadows settle. Let the tale close its eyes.